Ukraine refused three main peace plan demands during United States talks, significantly disrupting efforts to force its surrender. But it wasn't easy. The White House admitted that they demanded Ukraine's surrender because they don't believe in its victory. United States Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, during his visit to Kiev last week, warned Ukraine of inevitable defeat on the battlefield if it refuses a peaceful settlement. Two informed sources in the White House told national broadcasting company News about this. According to them, Driscoll told Ukrainian officials that Russian troops can fight indefinitely, and the scale and frequency of air attacks will only increase. They said Russia has endless troops, many missiles, and more. Driscoll also warned that the United States does not have the ability to supply Ukraine with weapons and air defense systems in the necessary quantities. Now it's clear why they chose Defense Minister Driscoll to go and, scare the Ukrainians, saying that the Russians are ready to fight endlessly, while the Americans supposedly have no more weapons. That's it. Meanwhile, the White House has stated that they now fear the Kremlin will not accept the revised peace plans from Geneva. That's why Trump will have to switch back to the side of good again, because they failed once more to pressure Ukraine and Europe. I'm Alexei Pechiy, let's discuss this further. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel and stay up to date with absolutely all the news, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription, using the links and details in the description. There are various platforms and bank details there, as well as PayPal and even crypto wallets, so I would be grateful for any support you can give. So, United States President Donald Trump recently announced progress in negotiations with Ukraine regarding ending the war, but Kiev rejected three key points of the American peace plan. The White House stated that Ukraine is still not ready to hand over the non-occupied part of Donbass to Russia, to limit its army to 600,000 troops, or to give up joining NATO. Moreover, a cable news network source in the White House says, quote, "It would be very wrong to say that we currently have a version of the peace plan that Ukraine fully accepts." Pechiy, he noted that the United States had proposed making part of Donbass a demilitarized zone, but under Russian control. But the wording on the territorial issue has not been agreed upon yet, which, by the way, sounds very strange, to make a demilitarized zone, but under Russian control. At what point did we start believing the Russians that there would really be a demilitarized zone there? These are Russians, I emphasize, these are Russians. To take the Russians at their word is to have no self-respect. In addition, Kiev is demanding a review of the troop limits for the army. And they are trying to convince Washington that refusing NATO membership sets a bad precedent for Russian influence over the North Atlantic Alliance, of which they are not a member. So basically, some unwashed Russia comes in from the outside and says, okay, NATO, you're going to act like this and no other way. And Trump, the leader of the country that leads NATO, says, all right, Vladimir Vladimirovich, we'll do it that way. And Ukraine warns that Putin will want NATO, for example, to return to the 1997 borders next. And then it will be harder for Trump to resist this because the balding dictator will become even bolder. In turn, a cable news network source in the White House draws attention to the fact that the 3 points on which disagreements arose correspond exactly to Russia's demands for ending the war. And that's why we're at a dead end again. Let me remind you that last week news emerged of a Ukraine peace plan developed by the United States President's administration. That's what was said, at least. The initial version of the document consisted of 28 points, and it was presented to Kiev by the United States Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll. Later, the American and Ukrainian delegations discussed the document in Geneva, and as a result, according to Trump, the plan was reduced to 22 points. However, several media outlets, citing negotiators, report 19 points. According to informed sources, Reuters partially relied on a proposal from a document that Russia handed over to the Trump administration back in October. In it, Moscow outlined its conditions for ending the war, which Ukraine had repeatedly rejected before. It's strange that Steve Witkoff still considered them. According to the published transcript of the conversation between Yuri Ushakov, assistant to the president of the Russian Federation, and Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev, Dmitriev gave Steve Witkoff, the American president's special representative, a Kremlin-prepared peace plan, which Washington later presented as its own. And it was clearly difficult for Ukraine to defend its position when officials from Trump's team were clearly not on Ukraine's side. United States Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, during his visit to Kiev last week, warned Ukraine about inevitable defeat on the battlefield if Ukraine refuses the peace plan that they tried to impose on us. According to National Broadcasting Company news sources, Driscoll told Ukrainian officials that Russian troops could fight indefinitely and the scale and frequency of air attacks would only increase. I'll assume that all of this was told to Witkoff by the Russians, and then Witkoff told Driscoll about it and says, listen to me. The Russians said that they have endless cannon fodder, their army is endless, their missiles and drones are endless, everything is endless. So you tell the Ukrainians that they'd better surrender already. Driscoll also warned that the United States does not have the capability to supply Ukraine with air defense systems in the necessary quantity. Here's a quote. The core message was, "You are losing and must accept a deal," one source told National Broadcasting Company News. Previously, Driscoll gave Kyiv a United States presidential peace plan, but Ukrainian authorities politely rejected it in its original form. This was followed by negotiations between the United States and Ukraine in Geneva, during which the document was significantly revised and shortened from 28 to 19 points. Trump said, "No, down to 22 points." Quote, a solution was found for many of them, and actually a very favorable one. This was stated by Trump. He also stressed the need for Ukraine to make territorial concessions. So once again, Trump is now openly saying, yes, Ukraine should give up its territories to the occupier. The occupier comes, attacks the country without any justification, without any reason at all, kills thousands and thousands of people. And Trump, who is the president of a country that once called itself the world's policeman, says that it's no big deal, just give them even more. Doesn't this remind you of the Munich Agreement of 1938? Now, I'll give you another quote from Trump. If you look, everything is moving in one direction on the front. So in the end, this land could be captured by Russia in the next few months. Anyway, I'll add something, or maybe it won't be recorded. So now do you want to fight and lose another 50, 60,000 people? Or do you want to do something right now? And so on. Trump announced that he was sending his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to negotiate with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He allowed that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, might accompany him on this trip. United States representatives and Putin may discuss a peace plan in early December. Interestingly, the New York Times reports that within Donald Trump's administration, concerns are growing that the peace plan, revised after talks with Ukrainians in Geneva, will be rejected by Vladimir Putin. Sources in the White House report that the document no longer contains restrictions for the Ukrainian armed forces, the ban on NATO membership, or clauses concerning Russian-American relations. Zelensky stated that territorial matters would only be addressed in a face-to-face meeting with Trump. Security guarantees for Ukraine have also been strengthened. Additionally, there are two statements. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and French President Emmanuel Macron both stated that peacekeeping forces will indeed appear in Ukraine after the ceasefire. The British and French are preparing their troops. And, moreover, Macron says that in addition to French and British troops, there could also be Turkish forces. Therefore, there are still no signs that Putin will agree to the new plan. Well, and some Trump administration officials believe that the Kremlin will reject it outright. So, to sum up, Steve Witkoff is going to Moscow, where Putin will reject the revised plan from Geneva. Most likely, he will refuse it and start pushing something new. Unexpected. The time that will pass will be unexpected. The time that will not pass will be unexpected. The time is unexpected, which is unexpected. The time is unexpected, which is unexpected. Time that will pass will be unexpected. Time will pass, it will be unexpected. If he thinks that the problems will intensify next year, he may take a more flexible position. I'll put an ellipsis here. Write your opinion and your conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.